in this segment, I'm going to talk about as fast as possible. I'm going to go through Prey, my thoughts on it, and I'm going to talk about all the things I liked and then all the things I didn't like. Truthfully, in a quick kind of bite-sized nutshell, this game was much better than I thought it was going to be. Not that I had low expectations coming in, but I feel like, as I said earlier today, Prey feels like a very kind of unspoken about game. And yet I know now that I've played it that there's going to be a bunch of people out there that really love this game, and I'm kind of sad that I haven't tried it sooner. This game is like a perfect blend between Control and Bioshock. That's like the best way I would describe it. And honestly, I had a blast with this game. There was times of frustration. There were times where I was gritting my teeth and curling my toes about some clunky mechanic here or there. But for the most part, yeah, I really had a blast with this game, and I would recommend it to a lot of people. Anyone who enjoys Fallout, or Fallout, particularly Fallout New Vegas, anybody who enjoys Bioshock, anybody who enjoys like spooky survival games, this is right up my alley, and I didn't know the game was like this. I thought it was just a kind of horror survival, well, not survival, but I thought it was like a horror simulator, kind of like Alien Isolation or something, which in a way it kind of is to a certain degree, except instead of being stalked by one monster, you're obviously fighting like an army of different things. We played this game for 30 hours, as you can see by my data here. We played it on normal, and we didn't play with any of the survival tools, which in hindsight, I'm super glad about, because this game is actually quite challenging without any of these extra features. Without having to worry about like oxygen or weapon degradation. This game is already quite tough, and I'm super pleased that we played it on normal. I'm so glad we didn't play it on hard, because there was times in this game where I got my ass kicked. So let's talk about the good stuff, and then we'll talk about the bad stuff, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. But ultimately, Prey was decent, and I hope that anybody who comes in here who has enjoyed the game also kind of agrees with some of my points. And if you're coming in here because you really didn't enjoy Prey, or you tried it and it wasn't your cup of tea, then hopefully you can maybe understand some of my points of view, and that might help you maybe give it a second chance, or just understand another perspective. But things Prey done really well. I love the spooky nature first and foremost. The setting of this game is brilliant. It's very much like a kind of, again, it's like Control, Resident Evil, any of these games where you're by yourself with the occasional character kind of wandering in. I loved the crafting system, picking up all of your items. At first I was a bit confused on how that worked, but once you get it down, it's super straightforward. I saw someone coming in, I think it was Vivorian mentioned earlier on in the playthrough, that I think a lot of people give this game a bad rep for not having enough inventory space, but honestly that's just because they don't understand how the inventory space is supposed to work, in my opinion. Now, I'm not going to try and put, words in people's mouths, but at first I was like, dude, I've got so much junk in my inventory, what do I do with all this crap? And then as soon as I got to the point where I realized when you get to a recycler, if you have a great item in your inventory, you just literally break it down immediately. It clears out your inventory so fast, and then you can make all the stuff that you want to. So first of all, let me just wrap up by saying that was great. I love that aspect. It was really cool. The whole like crafting system was great. The fact that you can play this game and go in whichever directions you want to a certain degree, there's obviously certain preventative barriers here and there. I love that you can kind of navigate into areas, and then based on your skills and what you've selected for your character, be it like being able to pick up and move obstacles, being able to hack, being able to repair equipment, and then eventually later on when you get your psi powers, your mimic powers, whatever you want to call them, the Typhon abilities, you can actually like change into things in the room and then roll under like security desks and things like that. It was really, really quite entertaining, and I can see tons of replayability for a game like this. When I looked online, I saw that this game was like a 20-hour game, but if you really want to experience all that Prey has to offer, I think doing a bunch of the side stuff is super exciting. It's not necessary because some people won't enjoy that, and so I'm not going to say, hey, you have to do it, because some people don't. They don't want that experience. They don't have the time for it. But I really would recommend that if you want to get the full value of Prey, having a look in all the corners, finding out all the kind of backstories, doing some of the side quests. You don't have to read every terminal, for fuck's sake, but like doing some of the side content really does fill out the game, and especially towards the end when we were getting our kind of mini report card after the credits and you're finding out the big twist, that moment where all the characters feed back to you about your decisions in the game and what you did was so good, and I really enjoyed that aspect about it. There's not a lot of games that kind of take everything you've done and then at the end of the game kind of do a quick kind of overview and be like, oh, remember when you did this? Oh, remember when you did that? And it kind of does make you feel a bit more appreciative. It feels like the game's acknowledging your accolades and accomplishments in the game, and is then giving you like a grading, A plus for this, oh, you let that guy die, that's a C minus, etc. And that's really phenomenal. The game looks good, and on PS4, for the most part, it ran really smoothly. There was a couple of instances where, towards the end, if there was a lot of monsters in an area, it was a little bit janky, but this game was really super stable. The only thing is on PS4, the loading times in the going between areas was particularly sluggish, but again, that's like a trade-off. I felt like once the game actually did the loading screen, it was super stable, so that was kind of cool. I think at one point I might go back and try Prey again. Maybe I'll even try some of the survival modes. I don't know, but the fact that you can do that is definitely a huge thumbs up. I feel like this game has just slipped under the radar for me, and I don't know why, because it really was great. The shooting mechanics all felt good. Eventually, when you get to the point where you find things like the neuromod blueprints and some of the blueprints for the other weapons, again, it's a testament to how good the kind of exploration aspects is. The fact that you can find these little blueprints in areas, and then suddenly you have, a whole bunch of like options for you, what you're going to spend your resources on. When you get certain perks, you can get more neuromods created, and then suddenly it opens up other aspects of the game. That whole chain system where everything connects, it does feel like I guess the point I'm trying to make is it does feel like your exploration is rewarded, which is really cool. That just how the game operates its kind of mechanics in terms of its like codes, all of your passwords, your door systems, the key codes, it's all done very smoothly and fluidly, and I've never really seen a game do it quite as nice. We had a lot of stuff written down on a notepad, oh, Dr. such and such, his door's still locked, we got to write that down in case we find it. And sometimes I did forget, okay, look, we've just been given, John Smith's passcode for whatever. Where was he again? Oh god, he was in this part of the map or this part of the map. We've had our own notes, but the game does a great job of like keeping track of all the stuff that you've registered, which I really appreciate, because they could have not had that system, and they could have totally left you high and dry, and you'd have to take like physical notes of door codes. They probably could have done that if they wanted, but the sheer amount of the record keeping you'd have to do would be insane. But again, given the fact that survival options exist, I'm surprised there's maybe not an option to do that, which would be absolutely crazy. Maybe that's too much programming required for that type of like gameplay. But yeah, in terms of the weapons, the suit upgrades, all of your skill tree stuff, all the combat feels really good for the most part. We'll get to some of the negatives in a minute, but in terms of your options for upgrading your character, at first it's nice because it feels quite compact. In the beginning you've only got a couple of options. Do I take more HP? Do I take extra stamina? Do I take, the ability to improve my guns? And then obviously when you get to the kind of main halfway point, when you start getting your Typhon abilities, the skill tree suddenly expands and you've got all this new extra content. And when I saw that, I was like, holy shit, dude, surely we must be close to the end of the game. But yeah, there was still a lot of content left. Again, mostly because we were roaming around in the side stuff. But if you are going to, I guess as a kind of final point in this before we get into some of the bad points, if you are looking to play this game and you want to kind of explore and take your time, you will get a good amount of gameplay out of this. Again, there's deceptive numbers online of people saying you can beat it in 20 hours. You can probably beat it in 20 hours or less, right? Some people will speedrun this so fast, but if you want to get the full value, I mean, it took us just about 30, which I would admit is probably that's probably a little bit longer than most people. But if you want to do a lot of the side stuff, you'll get a good value for playing this. You get good value for money when picking this game up. We played it through PlayStation Now, so if you have a PlayStation and you want to subscribe to the streaming service thing, it's like £8. You can play this game for free after you pay your £8, obviously. But yeah, story was good as well, and all of the twists, the characters involved, particularly your brother Alex and also the little drone January. I couldn't make my mind up all the way through who was the good guy and who was the bad guy. And then obviously yourself, Morgan, has suffered massive memory loss and trauma because of the neuromod extraction. I had no idea when I was playing through it who was going to be the good guy in the end and who was going to be the bad guy, and I didn't know what was going to be the right choice. And that the fact that it kept me guessing the whole way through kept it mysterious for me, and I really appreciated that. Because at first I was obviously on the side that I was like, okay, we are Morgan, we have to trust ourselves. But then at the end, when Alex is trying to make his point, and then January's making his case, and then, Dr. Igwe's arguing one point, and then your other characters are all arguing about different things, it was very intriguing to kind of follow that plot line. It's not massively crazy at the end, but there's a cool twist, and you guys will probably know if at this point you have played the game already. Definitely worth checking out in that regard. because the plot is good enough to keep you going. Sometimes you play games like this and you're playing purely for the level up RPG mechanics, or you want to do a run with certain characters or a certain character build and stuff. But the story's pretty good too for the first playthrough. Some of the negatives about Prey is sometimes I got a little bit frustrated with segments. These are minor points, but we have to talk about these. Mostly, I got frustrated at navigating in this game. Again, the loading times are a bit painful, but if you're playing on PC, you won't notice that shit. The backtracking across the station was fun for me, but I can see how that would get tedious for other people. Again, with the loading times filtered in, that might be a bit of a problem for you. When you realise that you've went all the way to one end, and then you've left a key card on the other side of the station, that can be a bit of a problem. So bear that in mind. I was also going to say that the segments where you are in the kind of jet propulsion suit, either in space or in an area of the space station where there's no gravity, and you have to glide about. At first I really thought that was a cool feature, but by the end of the game I was absolutely fed up of it. The sections where you have to go out to the exterior of the ship for me were very painful, and I don't know if other people are going to feel this way or not, but every time that somebody would phone me, one of the characters would call me on the intercom and they'd be like, yo, Morgan, we need you to go outside and seal the breach, or we need you to go outside and find this data, or go outside and get this person. Every time they told me that, my heart sank towards the end of the game because I hated it. I think what happened was I got a bit fatigued with the segments where you have to go out onto the Talos exterior and then the marker will be like 600 meters away and you'll get there, but then trying to like find the entrance point to get into a room or to get around the side of the ship to find an area, for me that was quite painful. And there was times where I was doing a lot of side content, and when I was doing the side content I started getting like trapped or lost in parts of the ship where I couldn't like freely walk around and explore it properly. Now if you throw into the fact that I have minimal ammo because I've not been to a recycler or something recently, or like a bunch of monsters turn up and try and attack you when you're doing side quest, when you're lost while like floating about in space, banging into walls, getting monsters blown up in your face and stuff, that gets quite stressful. And everybody's going to feel different, but I fucking hated that. And I could have definitely done with less segments where I was like floating around in space, or even just an enhanced navigation system for those particular parts. I mentioned it kind of like sometimes in certain RPGs like Skyrim or Oblivion, what will happen is you will head to a city and the quest marker will be on the main doors of the city or the sewer entrance to the city or like some sort of side entrance. And then once you go through those doors, the marker will then, once the loading screen's finished, ping to someone's house. And when you get to someone's house, the marker will then, once you go inside, ping to a chest or a desktop or some sort of terminal, and then from there you can find exactly where you need to go. When I was in space for this game, I kind of wish the marker would ping to the entrance of the hull breach, and then once I get there, then ping inside to like a body or a box or whatever. Sometimes I think it did do that, potentially, but towards the end, I was lost sometimes trying to get into these areas, and that really was frustrating. I will say that some of the enemies in the game were quite obnoxious sometimes as well. Some of the enemies were supposed to be weak to certain abilities, and then when I used those abilities on them, it just felt like they were a bit kind of lackluster. Now, people in my chat told me at some point, the enemies scale, and maybe that's the case, maybe they do. There was a couple of times where I would literally scan an enemy, and it would be like, oh, this enemy is weak to fire, this enemy is weak to psi damage, and sometimes it worked like a treat. You'd hit the enemy with the EMP grenade that was weak to the EMP, and it would literally knock them out of commission, and then you walk up and you double tap them with a pistol and they take huge damage, and it feels super satisfying. But then other times I was using my abilities on the enemies and it just felt like it just didn't work properly, and that was a little bit fatiguing. So sometimes, like the nightmare, the first time that I figured out, eventually at one point when I scanned the nightmare, I realized it was super weak to psychic, and my strategy was to knock it out with psychic, then use the Q beam to just laser it and kill it. And the psychic ability the first time knocked it out of commission, which was cool. And then the second time I tried to fight it, the psi ability had no effect on it whatsoever. It did a chunk of damage slightly, but then it didn't get like knocked out. Now, that would have been cool if the enemy was maybe getting resistant to my abilities, similarly to in Alien Isolation, how the alien starts to learn your techniques. If you use the flamethrower all the time, it starts to know to dodge the flamethrower, or if you walk, it starts standing still to try and catch you out and things like that. If the enemies were learning or getting stronger, that's kind of cool. But then the third time or the fourth time I fought the nightmare, I used my psi ability and it knocked out completely again, and it worked super properly like it was supposed to. And I was just trying to understand, like, what is the consistency here, and it felt a little bit wank. But yeah, minor point. That didn't happen often, but sometimes some of the certain enemies I would use an ability on it, and it would be really good and really powerful, and then the next time not so much. It was just felt really inconsistent. There was a couple of times where I learned certain techniques, and I would try and then use those techniques, and then suddenly they felt like super blunt. Maybe that was just me. There was a couple of bugs as well. People talk about like Bethesda games. I think Bethesda, they didn't develop this game, but they published it. There's a couple of times where like characters would like glitch or items would fall through walls or things like that. It only happened a handful, but it did happen once or twice. There was a time where an enemy knocked me into a staircase and I got stuck. I couldn't get out. I was free falling in the staircase. That happens once in a blue moon. That's fine. When I tried to actually turn into a cup, I transformed into a cup and it threw me out of the shuttle into space, and then the game crashed, which is really funny. But there was a couple of times where towards the end when I was trying to get the mercenary guy, what's his name? Was it Dal? I was trying to get the people watching the stream have literally just saw me do this and they're already, exhausted from it. But there was times where I was trying to drag Dal's corpse into the med bay, and no matter how many times I put him in the med bay, the quest marker wouldn't activate, it wouldn't pop. And then I looked online on Google and people were saying you have to like load up a fresh save and do it again. So I did, and I would put Dal in the med bay and then it worked straight away. But the fact that I had problems with that was quite frustrating. I had to listen to audio logs over and over again every time I reloaded it, and that shit got a bit tedious as well. But these are all minor gripes with Prey. Ultimately, I'll wrap this up because I'm waffling, but this game is actually really good. A couple of problems towards the end of the game did kind of set me back. I think I would have given this game like a solid 8, maybe an 8.5. This game was really good for me, and it ticked all my boxes and what I like from video games. It's not going to be for everyone. Again, towards the end, there was a couple of moments that really frustrated me. Either to do with like monsters attacking me out of nowhere, or running out of supplies, or just general clunk, like glitches or bugs or little problems. That pulled the score down for me because it got so frustrating at one point that I was just trying to push through areas just to get it finished because it was so clunky. But yeah, absolutely would recommend if you like these kind of survival games, if you like spooky games, definitely try picking up Prey and giving it a go. I think we'll maybe revisit this at some point again in the future, but that's my thoughts.